Her true story from Washington State. My daughter slammed my walker against the wall and shouted, "Stop being such a burden. Find somewhere else to go." So I packed my bags and took the house keys with me. By sunrise I was gone. By sunset, they discovered the locks had changed. "You are bleeding us dry, you old bat. You are not fit to be anyone's mother anymore. A decrepit woman like you should be rotting away in some nursing home." Those were the precise words my daughter screamed at me that rainy October morning, standing beside the granite kitchen island where I had once taught her to bake cookies and nursed her through countless childhood fevers with cool washcloths and patience. Her expression was contorted with rage. Her hands clenched tight, shoulders hunched forward, like she was preparing for battle. Her husband lurked in the hallway, pretending to check his phone, pretending he couldn't hear every venomous word. Just like he always did, I stood there perfectly still, my fingers gripping my walker, not from weakness but from the sharp pain that shot through my arthritic hands whenever I forgot to take my joint medication. My prescription bottle sat empty on the windowsill, forgotten for 3 days, despite my gentle reminders. A few capsules had scattered across the tile floor during her tantrum, the bright red pills rolling under the dishwasher like drops of blood. I stared down at them briefly, then carefully lowered myself to retrieve the container, one hand steadying against the cabinet. My knees protested, but I did it without making a sound. No complaint, no whimper, just determined silence. My daughter said nothing either. She had already turned her back to me. As I gathered the remaining pills, memories flooded back, unbidden. The kind that surface at the worst moments and settle like stones in your chest. I was 31 and divorced, working double shifts at the elementary school cafeteria, saving every penny to afford dance lessons my daughter desperately wanted. I remember eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so she could have fresh fruit with her lunch money. I remember mending her ballet shoes with needle and thread instead of buying new ones. I remember every sacrifice, every missed meal, every ache I endured silently, all to ensure she had opportunities I never did. I gave her my entire world, and now she stood there calling me a burden. I had sensed the shift coming for months. It began gradually, as these transformations often do. Small remarks made when she thought I wasn't listening, or the way her husband would grimace whenever I entered their conversations. Then came the exclusions. Decisions made about my life without consulting me. Relocating my belongings from the comfortable guest suite to the converted garage because they needed space for his home office. Removing the small television from my area to reduce electricity bills. Questioning whether I truly required the heating pad for my back pain at my age. The changes escalated slowly, but relentlessly, like watching storm clouds gather on the horizon, knowing you cannot outrun what is coming. Each week brought fresh humiliations disguised as reasonable requests. I was too chatty, too opinionated, too visible. I was asked to give them space, then criticized for being withdrawn. There was no winning scenario. I stopped attempting to please them. I had moved in after my husband's sudden heart attack 3 years ago. 62 years of marriage ended in 12 minutes. I couldn't bear staying alone in the farmhouse we would built together in rural Washington. My daughter suggested I come live with them in their suburban Tacoma neighborhood, help with my granddaughter, provide companionship, reduce living expenses. The arrangement seemed logical. At first, it felt like genuine care. Initially, everything functioned smoothly. I maintained my independence, contributed where appropriate, paid significantly more than my fair share of household expenses, even though they never requested it. I used my teaching pension to help during their financial struggles. When their furnace died that first winter, I covered the replacement cost. When her car transmission failed, I handled the repair bill. I was delighted to help. Families support each other. That is what I believed then. When they found this particular house, the price exceeded their budget substantially. Their credit history was problematic, and the mortgage company expressed serious reservations. They needed someone to co-sign the loan. I volunteered without hesitation, considering it a family investment. My name appeared on both the mortgage documents and the property deed. I never imagined that decision would eventually become a weapon aimed at me. I never thought they would forget the legal implications. Now here we stood, 3 years later, and my daughter positioned herself in what I still considered my kitchen. Whether she acknowledged it or not, yelling at me, like I was an unwanted stray cat, refusing to leave their doorstep. "You act like we owe you something special," she said, avoiding my gaze completely. "We provided you shelter. We gave you a place to stay. That should be sufficient gratitude." I felt my posture straighten, not from pride, but from instinct. A response developed through decades of maintaining composure during classroom chaos, difficult parent conferences, and now adult children turned hostile. "I never asked you to provide me shelter," I said quietly. She scoffed dismissively. "Oh, please, what were your alternatives? Living alone and dying in that ancient farmhouse?" I remained silent. She walked to the refrigerator, grabbed an energy drink, consumed it directly from the can. "You think because you bought some groceries and watched Emma a few evenings, you deserve to live here permanently without paying rent." That moment revealed she had forgotten about the mortgage agreement. Or she had convinced herself it was irrelevant, that I was merely a guest in her house. An inconvenience, a mistake, and that whatever I had contributed previously meant nothing now. I collected the final pill and secured the bottle cap. "If you want me to leave, simply say so directly," I said. She turned around, made eye contact with me for the first time that morning. "Fine. I want you gone. I am exhausted from walking on eggshells around you. We have plans for this house. Maybe we will rent the garage space to someone who actually contributes financially." I nodded slowly. Behind her, her husband entered the kitchen holding his laptop. He gave me a condescending half-smile, the expression people wear when they have already won something they don't deserve. I turned away from both of them, my feet cold against the hardwood floor, and walked deliberately toward my converted living space. Not the comfortable guest room upstairs where I used to sleep near my granddaughter's room, but the makeshift area they had given me next to the washer and dryer. The mattress was uncomfortable. The air constantly smelled like fabric softener. It is where they kept their exercise equipment now, too. I opened the drawer of my old nightstand, a piece I had brought from my farmhouse, and removed a manila envelope. Inside was the original property deed, bearing my name exclusively. It had never been modified. I remembered signing it, remembered how the pen felt in my hand, how the notary had smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Patterson. You own a lovely home." They had never bothered to add their names. Too busy with other priorities, too confident I would never leave, too certain I had nowhere else to go. I placed the envelope in my suitcase, then I returned to the kitchen. They were still there, attempting to appear casual, pretending not to notice me as I moved with calm purpose. I opened the cabinet, retrieved my tea kettle, filled it with water, placed it on the stove. My daughter watched me suspiciously. "What are you doing?" "Making chamomile tea." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "You don't need to be theatrical about this. Just pack up and go." I smiled peacefully. "I will," I said, "tomorrow morning." Then I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, and watched the steam rise. I sipped slowly and deliberately. I didn't flinch when she cursed under her breath and stormed away. I didn't react when her husband muttered, "This is exactly what I mean, always creating awkward situations." I simply drank my tea because I knew that by sunrise I would be gone, and by sunset they would discover the locks had been changed. I was 26 when my first husband abandoned us without warning. He left behind a half-finished dinner, a crying toddler clinging to my skirt, and a note that said, "I need to discover who I really am." I never heard from him again. No phone calls, no child support payments, no letters, just silence and a mountain of unpaid bills. I cried exactly once, just once. Then I laced up my shoes, tied my apron, and got to work. I became a teacher because circumstances demanded it. It wasn't about ambition or fulfilling dreams. It was about survival. I worked extra hours in classrooms that smelled like chalk dust and children's anxiety. I graded papers and guided young minds. I wiped away tears and faced administrative battles more times than I can remember. I comforted struggling students and whispered encouragement to kids who would never see their potential realized. And through everything, I came home to one constant: my daughter. She was my purpose. I remember sitting in the faculty lounge during my brief lunch break, eating crackers from a sleeve and counting minutes until I could go home and read her bedtime stories. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to buy her first computer. I sewed her school costumes from discount fabric. I never remarried, never even considered dating seriously. My universe revolved around her, and for many years I believed I had succeeded. She was intelligent, beautiful, full of charm and potential. People always said, "She is going to accomplish amazing things." That girl, I believed them. I believed in her more than I ever believed in myself. When she met him, her husband, I welcomed him warmly. He was polite initially, perhaps somewhat distant, but I attributed that to nervousness. Not every son-in-law wants to share living space with his wife's mother. I understood that completely. I tried to make myself helpful, unobtrusive, invisible when necessary. I watched my granddaughter, prepared meals, cleaned up messes, all without being asked. I avoided their arguments, respected their privacy, and smiled when expected to. But the dynamic began shifting. The house they desired was beyond their financial reach. Their credit was damaged from student loans, credit cards, and one poorly advised investment in a revolutionary pet grooming franchise. They were rejected by multiple lenders. I could see the stress in their faces, so I offered assistance. I didn't wait for them to ask. I agreed to co-sign their mortgage application. The house was stunning, single-story craftsman style, a wraparound deck, maple trees lining the driveway. It offered the space they needed and the character they craved, but none of it would have been possible without my financial backing. I remember sitting in the bank, signing the paperwork, and my daughter squeezing my hand. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "You saved our dreams." I smiled. Because that is what mothers do. We save them, even when they don't realize they need saving. I withdrew funds from my retirement account to cover the down payment. I paid the first year of homeowner's insurance and covered moving expenses. When the plumbing failed 8 months later, I paid for repairs. When the roof leaked, I bought the new materials. I told myself it was an investment in family, in legacy. I told myself that someday, when I could no longer care for myself, they would remember my generosity. But that is not what happened. Once the paperwork was finalized and the rooms were furnished, I began to disappear. Not immediately. It started with a decorative pillow being moved. Then a bookshelf cleared for their new collectibles. Then my rocking chair, the one where I had held my daughter during her teenage heartbreaks, was relocated to the garage to create space. Eventually, I was moved to the converted garage entirely, to what they called the in-law suite. It was really a repurposed storage area adjacent to the laundry room, where the sound of spinning machines became my nighttime soundtrack. I tried not to take it personally. I continued helping, continued cooking, washing clothes, writing checks when needed. But appreciation transformed into expectation. Expectation transformed into entitlement. I went from being the matriarch to being the hired help. The way they addressed me changed too. "Did you already eat, my son?" In-law would ask, not from concern, but as a warning. Don't consume what belongs to them. "We really need more storage space for Emma's art supplies," she said one afternoon, eyeing my dresser. "You are always just sitting around," she said. Another time, her voice sharp with irritation. I began eating meals alone in my area. I began remaining silent at the dinner table. I began feeling like an intruder in a house that bore my name on legal documents they had completely forgotten. Then came the whispered conversations they assumed I couldn't hear. "I feel like she is constantly watching us," she said one evening. her voice carrying through the thin walls. "She is not even contributing to rent." My son-in-law replied, his tone low but cutting. "They forgot the repairs I had funded, the furniture I had provided, the nights I had spent walking their colicky baby up and down the hallway while they slept undisturbed." One evening, I overheard a conversation that chilled my blood. "She is like this dark cloud hanging over everything," my son-in-law said, "this old ghost that will not move on. It is suffocating." "I know," my daughter replied. "It is like she is just waiting to die here. Honestly, sometimes I wish she would just go. We could finally have our own life." They were in the living room. The door was partially open. They had no idea I was folding towels. Just steps away. I dropped a washcloth and stood motionless, my heart pounding in my chest. They didn't even lower their voices. "She has lived her life," he said, "and now she is just dragging us down. It is like we are stuck in limbo waiting for her to disappear. A dark cloud, a ghost, a weight they carried reluctantly." I stood there, holding a pair of my granddaughter's socks I had bought, washed, folded, and I felt something inside me break. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the casualness with which they were spoken, the comfort, the complete absence of guilt. I realized then I was no longer her mother in her mind. I was no longer the woman who had sacrificed everything for her future. I was no longer family. I was just another obstacle, a burden. And they had begun planning for life without me. But what they didn't know, what they had chosen to forget, was that I had signed something too, something they never modified, something they would soon regret leaving in my name, because I may have been quiet. But I was never foolish, and I never forgot who I truly was. Not then, not ever. It started with a printed document slipped under my door. No greeting, no warmth, just a typed header at the top reading, "Monthly Living Contribution Statement." Initially, I thought it was an error, some billing notice intended for someone else, but when I opened it, my name was there, printed clearly. They wanted me to pay rent, $900 monthly, due by the 1st. No discussion, no advance warning, just a formal demand for shared housing costs and equitable occupancy fees. I stared at the paper until the text became blurry. I wanted to laugh. Genuinely, I did. But my chest ached with the kind of pain that doesn't disappear with medication or rest. I walked into the living room, holding the document in my hand. My daughter was watching television, feet propped on the coffee table I had purchased. "What is this?" I asked. She muted the remote without looking at me. "It is just fairness, Mom. Everyone should contribute." We discussed it. "No," I said softly. "You didn't," she sighed, as if my confusion was exhausting. "You use utilities, internet, cable. You eat food here. You live here. You should help with expenses. That is all we are saying." "I already helped with expenses," I replied. "I helped purchase this house." She finally looked at me then, but it wasn't guilt in her expression. It was calculation. "That was years ago. You cannot just keep bringing that up. You live here now. Money's tight." Money wasn't tight. They had a new SUV, a remodeled bathroom, and annual ski trips to Whistler. I walked back to my area slowly, my joints aching, the paper still trembling in my hand. A week later, I found my bed disassembled and relocated, my dresser removed when I asked what was happening. My son-in-law said, "Emma needs more room for her activities. We are making the upstairs more efficient." I was moved downstairs into what had once been a storage closet. Concrete floor, one small window, a fold-out cot with a thin mattress. No closet, no privacy. "Lots of people sleep in basements," she said. "It is not like you have mobility issues, right?" She knew I did. I had told her about my arthritis after my fall last spring. Meals changed as well. I used to prepare food for the family, sometimes elaborate Sunday dinners with roasted chicken and apple pie that ended. My daughter began serving my meals separately. Smaller portions, no seconds. Sometimes, I would find sticky notes on the refrigerator stating, "For Emma, not for Grandma, already counted." My medication, once stored in the bathroom cabinet, was moved to a box in the laundry area. The pills were mixed up once, twice. I said nothing. I began keeping them in a pouch around my neck. Then came the isolation. My book club used to meet every third Tuesday. We would read, drink coffee, and discuss our grandchildren. One day, I went to the driveway to wait for Margaret, my friend from church. She always provided transportation. She never arrived. When I called her later, her voice was puzzled, cautious. "Your daughter told me you were feeling unwell," she said. "She said you weren't really up for social activities anymore. That was news to me." She paused. "She also mentioned you might be moving to assisted living. She didn't want to upset you with details. Assisted living. That is how they phrased it." I didn't sleep that night, or the one after. I began waking with a start, imagining locks on my door, my belongings on the lawn. The next Sunday, I went outside to sit on the deck and wave at the neighbors as I always did. Only they didn't wave back when I greeted Mrs. Chen. She gave a tight smile. "Still here," she said. "Pardon me?" She cleared her throat. "Oh, nothing. Just heard from your daughter you were planning to relocate soon. Thought you would be gone by now." Gone by now, they were spreading rumors. They were portraying me as someone who had overstayed her welcome. Someone clinging to a house she had no right to occupy. I had become the villain in their narrative. The morning it happened, I had awakened early, my heart racing, chest constricted. I reached for my pill bottle in the darkness and discovered it was empty. I had reminded my son-in-law 3 days earlier to pick up the refill. He had nodded, agreed. The refill had not appeared. I stumbled to the hallway, knocking on their bedroom door. No response. I knocked again. My head was spinning. Finally, the door opened slightly. She looked at me with one eyebrow raised. "I don't have my medication," I said, voice raspy. She rolled her eyes. "It is 6:15 in the morning." "I need it." My chest. She raised a hand. "You are being dramatic again." And then she closed the door. I turned around and attempted to make it to the kitchen. I don't remember falling. I only remember the cold floor against my face, and the sound of their dog whimpering. When I regained consciousness, I was still on the floor. My granddaughter was crying somewhere upstairs. She stood above me, arms folded. "See," she muttered, "always putting on a performance." "She is fine." I tried to speak, but my lips felt numb. My son-in-law came downstairs a moment later, rubbing his eyes. "What now?" he asked. "She just collapsed like a stone," his wife said. "No warning, just dropped." Honestly, I think it is just attention-seeking behavior. He walked past me to the refrigerator, opened a bottle of juice. "I am not calling paramedics," he said. "She will recover. She always does." I lay there for another 15 minutes before I was able to sit up, my breathing shallow, my hands shaking. No one assisted me. When I finally stood, I walked back to my area and sat on the edge of the cot. I stared at the wall for a long time. Then I took out my journal and I began recording every date, every payment I made, every expense I covered, every moment of cruelty. I didn't cry this time either, because when the moment came, I would not beg. I would not argue. I would show them what they had forgotten. And I would do it in complete silence. There is a small fireproof safe in the back of my old closet. It is scratched on the outside, dusty from years of neglect, but the combination still works perfectly. It was my husband's originally, and after he passed, I never had the courage to discard it. I just moved it from house to house, from memory to memory, like a silent guardian of everything I once thought would matter. Only during emergencies. That morning, it became more than a container. It became my evidence. The light in the garage was dim, flickering like a dying bulb. But I didn't need bright light to remember what I was searching for. My fingers found the key, taped to the bottom of the second drawer, right where I had hidden it all those years ago. When I turned the key and opened the safe, I could almost hear my late husband's voice. "Keep the originals, Dorothy. People forget, paper remembers." He had been right about many things. This was the one I treasured most. Inside were folders, some yellowed with age, others neatly labeled in my handwriting. Mortgage, deed, bank transfers, home repairs. Even the folder labeled emergency fund, though that was nearly empty now. I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, the cold seeping through my bones, and began organizing. There it was, the original purchase agreement for the house. My name, my signature. No mention of my daughter. She had terrible credit then, and no bank would approve her application. I had told her I would co-sign to help, but we never added her to the deed. They never asked me to. They just assumed. There was the payment record. 3 years of monthly mortgage bills, all paid from my checking account. Every canceled check, every confirmation receipt. There was the record of the down payment from my retirement fund. There were the receipts for the furnace repair, the roof replacement, the plumbing work after the first heavy rainfall. There were the utility bills, water, gas, electric, all in my name. I sat there for nearly 3 hours, organizing, labeling, breathing slow and steady through every emotion that passed through me like a thunderstorm. Not anger, not quite, more like clarity, cold and sharp. When I had everything I needed, I took out my cell phone and dialed the number I had not called in over a decade. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Wellington and Associates law firm. "This is Dorothy Patterson," I said. "I was married to Harold Patterson. You handled his estate years ago." There was a pause. Then a kind intake of breath. "Dorothy. Of course, this is Robert. I remember you. I still have the file. How can I help?" "I need to understand the legal standing of my home," I said. "The one I live in now. There is a situation." He listened quietly as I explained. I gave him the address, the dates, the names. He asked me to email him scanned copies of everything. I did it right there, sitting on the garage floor, using the scanner app he walked me through. When he called me back later that afternoon, his tone was gentle but firm. "Dorothy, it is exactly as you remember. You are the sole legal owner of the property. Your name is on the deed, and there is no secondary party listed. Your daughter and her family, well, they are not tenants, not legally. They are guests, and you are well within your right to ask them to leave." I closed my eyes for a long moment. "I don't want to cause harm," I said. "You are not," he replied. "You are establishing boundaries." He offered to handle the paperwork for me, said he would email a formal notice to vacate, with my signature required, and a 30-day timeline, though he reminded me I could give less if I chose to. I told him I would decide by the end of the day. I hung up and sat still. The garage was quiet. The hum of the washing machine, the only sound. Upstairs, I could hear the faint sound of my granddaughter's feet running across the floor. My daughter's voice, laughing at something on the television. They didn't know. Not yet, but they would. I printed the letter, read it twice, signed my name at the bottom with a hand that no longer trembled. Then I walked to the mailbox 3 blocks away, not because I had to, but because I wanted the walk. I wanted to feel the weight of that letter in my coat pocket, close to my heart. At the mailbox, I paused, not because I was uncertain, but because I knew. I slid the envelope in and listened to it drop. A sound so soft, it might have been mistaken for nothing at all. But I knew better. That sound was the end of their assumption. The end of my silence. The end of them living in a house they believed was theirs. Under a roof I had paid for. Under terms they never understood. I turned around and walked home slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest. I felt like the owner. I woke up before dawn that morning. The house was quiet, still wrapped in the comfort of sleep, unaware that this would be the last morning it would ever know me. My back ached the way it always did. My knees protested when I swung my legs off the cot, but I moved with a calm steadiness. There was no hesitation in me, only decision. I slipped into the kitchen, barefoot, careful not to make a sound. The cat lifted her head but didn't meow. She always preferred me to them. I started the coffee, the good kind, the one I kept hidden in a sealed container behind the cleaning supplies because she always bought the store brand. I took out the flour, the eggs, the cinnamon, and began to bake blueberry muffins, their favorite. I knew the recipe by heart, not from a cookbook, but from memory, just like everything else I had given them. As the oven warmed the air, I set the table like I used to when they first moved in. Cloth napkins folded, plates warmed, small touches that nobody had requested, yet always expected. I placed the muffins in the center, golden and fragrant, and poured 3 cups of coffee. No one would thank me, but I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because it was the final time, the last quiet act of a woman they thought they had erased. I walked back to my area, the garage room, the one they gave me when I stopped being family and started being furniture, and I pulled my suitcase from the closet. It was already packed. 1 week of planning, 1 week of folding silently, hiding bags beneath old blankets, moving things slowly so no one would notice. They didn't. They never looked. Everything I owned now fit into a single suitcase and a canvas bag. My life reduced to zippers and handles. On the kitchen table, next to the blueberry muffins, I placed a handwritten note on my best stationery. It said, "Thank you for finally showing me who you really are." Beside it, I placed an envelope. Inside was the formal eviction notice, the deed in my name, copies of payment receipts, and a signed declaration from my lawyer. They had 48 hours to vacate. I stood in the hallway for a moment and looked around one final time. The picture frames were full of memories that no longer belonged to me. The toys scattered across the carpet were no longer for me to organize. The echo of children's laughter that once made my heart swell now felt distant, like a memory that had been sharpened into something that could wound. I did not cry. I closed the door gently behind me and walked out into the cool morning air. Ruth lived 1 town over. She and I had worked the same school district decades ago. I had helped her through her husband's illness, helped her raise 4 children when he was bedridden with cancer. We had lost touch after retirement, as people often do. But last week, when I called and told her everything, she said 3 words. "Come home, Dorothy." She met me at the front gate in a blue bathrobe, her silver hair pulled back in a ponytail, her arms open like no time had passed. We hugged for a long time. She didn't ask why I looked exhausted. She knew. That afternoon, I sat at her kitchen table, holding a cup of herbal tea, and told her everything. The rent demand, the garage room, the withheld medication, the fall, the papers, the silence. She listened without interrupting, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. When I finished, she exhaled slowly and said, "Well, it is about time the world learns you were never just a shadow in someone else's house." We laughed then, both of us loud and free, the kind of laugh you forget how much you missed until it fills your chest again. Back at the house I left behind, they would be waking up soon, expecting blueberry muffins, expecting me to be there, like I always was. Quiet, predictable, endlessly available. Instead, they would find the coffee gone cold, the muffins untouched, and my chair at the table empty. And on that table, a thick envelope. I imagined my daughter picking it up, her name printed on the front in my cursive. I imagined her husband asking what it was, his voice already sharp with suspicion. I imagined her opening it and reading each page, her face changing as she realized that the home she thought she controlled was never hers to begin with. They would scream, they would deny, they would call me. I would not answer. They would call again. But by then, I would be gone, settled in Ruth's guest room, with a window that overlooked a small garden and a chair that didn't creak when I sat in it. Ruth had already brewed another pot of coffee. She handed me a mug and said, "To freedom." I raised it to remembering who you are before they tried to rewrite you. That night, I slept with the window open, and for the first time in years, I slept without fear of being watched, without the weight of being unwelcome in my own life. And in the silence of Ruth's spare room, I dreamed, not of what I had lost, but of what I had finally reclaimed. My name, my worth, my home. The storm came suddenly that afternoon, drumming on the pavement with a kind of urgency that makes everything feel more intense. The sky had turned a deep gray, heavy with clouds that refused to hold back. I sat by Ruth's window with a warm cup of tea, watching the pond ripple with every drop. It was peaceful here, tranquil, the kind of place where neighbors waved from their gardens, and the wind didn't carry arguments through the walls. My phone rang for the first time just after 2 of the clock, then again at 2:03, 2:06, 2:08. Each time, the same name lit up the screen. Jessica, my daughter. I did not answer. By the 5th call, she left a voicemail, her voice strained, desperate. Mom, what is this? What is this letter? What the hell is going on? At 2:15, a message from her husband. You have lost your mind. We took care of you, and this is how you repay us. That word again, repay. I turned off my phone and placed it in the drawer beside Ruth's knitting basket. By evening, the messages turned into threats. Then, pleading. Then silence. They showed up at Ruth's house the next morning, soaked from the drive, rage and desperation clinging to them, like the rainwater dripping from their jackets. Ruth opened the door, standing tall in her doorway with her apron, still on, and a spatula in her hand. We are looking for Dorothy, my son, in-law snapped. She is not here, Ruth replied, voice calm, and even if she were, she wouldn't come out just to be yelled at. She is our mother, Jessica barked. Ruth blinked slowly. You remember that now. They did not come back. A week later, the sheriff posted the final notice on the front door of the house they thought belonged to them. 30 days, that was the grace period I gave them. More than they ever gave me. I could have enforced it faster, but I wanted them to sit in it, to feel what it is like to wake up in a house knowing it no longer wants you. They tried to fight it, of course, claimed tenants' rights, hired a discount lawyer, said I was mentally unstable, vindictive, emotionally manipulative. But the paper trail didn't lie. The deed, the payments, the records. They all sang the same truth. It was never their home. Their names weren't even on the utility bills. When the eviction finalized, they had no plan, no apartment lined up, no savings to put down a deposit. Their credit was still damaged from years of poor decisions. No landlord would accept them with an active legal dispute on file. They moved into an extended stay motel 2 towns over. I heard this from a neighbor, the kind woman down the road who used to bring over casseroles during the holidays. She called me one morning, said she saw them packing boxes with their heads down, like shadows dragging behind their own shame. I wish I would known, she told me. I would have helped you sooner. You did, I said. You believed me. A few weeks later, I sold the house, not to a developer, not to someone who would tear down everything I built. I sold it to a woman named Carol, a single mother of 3, working full-time at the credit union, saving for years. She would always admired the house from across the street, but never thought she would be able to afford it. I gave her a price she could manage. When we signed the papers, she cried. Not from stress, like I once did, but from joy. I will take care of it, she promised. I will make it a home again. I believed her. She planted sunflowers in the front yard, painted the mailbox a cheerful yellow, hung wind chimes on the deck where my daughter once shouted at me in front of my granddaughter. 3 months after they left, Jessica came back. She stood on the porch with a paper bag in one hand and a weary look that didn't belong to the girl I raised, but to a woman who had burned every bridge and now stood cold in the water. Carol opened the door. She asked to speak with me. Carol told her I didn't live there anymore. Then she asked to buy the house back. I can pay more than she did, she insisted. I need it back. Please. Carol tilted her head, then said something I will never forget. I bought this house from a woman who knew her worth, she said. A mother who was more generous than you ever deserved. You lost it the moment you forgot who she was. You don't just get to undo that. Then she closed the door. Jessica stood on the porch for a moment longer, then walked away. Not a word since, not a letter, not a call. But sometimes, when the sky goes gray and the rain taps on the window, I wonder if she remembers the smell of blueberry muffins baking, the way I folded her clothes, the way I used to wait up when she was out too late, just to make sure she got home safe. Maybe she does, or maybe she is still trying to figure out when exactly the house stopped being hers. The answer is simple. It never was. The kitchen in my new home is small, but it is mine. The light filters through the window at just the right angle each morning, warming the floor beneath my feet as I stand barefoot, waiting for the kettle to whistle. I keep the countertops clear, the spice rack organized, and the cookie jar full just in case I have visitors, which I do now and then. But mostly, it is quiet. And I like it that way. I planted herbs last month. Just 3 small pots on the windowsill: basil, rosemary, and thyme. They are growing slowly but steadily, like me. Some mornings, I talk to them while I water. Tell them about the women I met the night before, about the breeze off the lake, about how it feels to wake up in a place where no one sighs when you hum while cooking. Sometimes, I write letters, not to anyone in particular, just to myself. I have a little box of them now, dated and folded neatly. One of them says, "You didn't die, you just needed to leave." That is what it felt like. Really. Like resurrection, like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel I had convinced myself was home. It didn't take long before I found purpose again. There is a senior center, not far from here, quiet building with comfortable chairs and staff who know how to listen. I started volunteering on Wednesdays, sharing coffee and stories with women my age who have been through things their children will never know. I tell them my story. I tell them about the deed, the garage room, the pills, the silence. And their eyes fill with the kind of tears that don't fall, but sit there, heavy and trembling. I tell them to keep their documents, to remember their names, to sign nothing blindly. Some of them started calling me Aunt Justice. I laugh every time, but I keep showing up. Last week, I helped a woman named Patricia go over her home title. Her son had asked her to refinance in his name. She was hesitant. I looked her in the eye and said, "If they treat you like furniture, don't hand them the house." She smiled for the first time all day. And me, I am smiling too, more than I thought I would. My daughter still calls. She sends messages too. Sometimes they come at night, the time when regret speaks the loudest. "Mom, please. I am sorry. Can we talk? Can I see you?" I do not answer. It is not out of cruelty. It is out of clarity. She made a choice when she threw my walker aside, when she raised her voice instead of her heart, when she let me collapse on the floor without calling for help. She chose to forget who I was to her, and now, I have chosen to remember who I am for myself. I am a mother, yes, but motherhood is not a contract for endless forgiveness. It is not a vow to carry a grown woman across every bridge she insists on burning. There comes a time when even the most devoted mother must set her child down and let her walk, no matter how many times she falls. My task ended the day she told me to leave, and leave I did. Now, I spend my mornings in peace, sipping coffee that doesn't taste bitter anymore. I fill my afternoons with fresh air, folded letters, and the kind of laughter that only comes from knowing you were right to stand your ground. There is no anger left in me, only space for herbs, for stories, for second chances, mine, not hers. And every now and then, I sit in my new kitchen, tea steeping, and I smile at the breeze through the open window. Not because everything turned out perfect, but because I finally did. I do not hate my daughter. I say that not because I am some sainted figure who has transcended pain, but because hate is too heavy to carry when you are finally free. What I feel now is quieter, deeper. It is the weightless understanding that sometimes the ones we love most are the ones who must be left behind. If she had never called me a burden, if she had never slammed my walker against the wall, or let me collapse without lifting a finger, I might still be living in that garage, still shrinking, still justifying, still believing that love meant letting yourself be erased. But she gave me a gift without knowing it. She showed me who she really was, and in doing so, she reminded me of who I had always been. That is why I do not hate her. Because without her betrayal, I might never have found my voice again. I might never have remembered the woman who once worked double shifts to keep the lights on, who once raised a girl with her bare hands and a heart made of steel. I might never have realized that survival is not the same as living, and that dignity is not something you reclaim. This story is not just mine. It belongs to every mother who has been told she is in the way, to every wife who became invisible the moment her usefulness expired, to every grandmother whose name is spoken only when babysitting is needed, or a check needs signing, or someone wants the house. We are more than background characters in their lives. We are the reason they have lives to begin with. So if you are reading this, if you are sitting in a chair you paid for, in a room they make you feel unwelcome in, wondering if your love is still worth giving, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Do not wait until they forget who you are to remember it yourself. Keep your name on the deed, keep your own bank account, keep the receipts, the emails, the paper trail, but most of all, keep your power. Not so you can destroy them, so you can protect yourself. I do not know if my daughter will ever change. Maybe she will. Maybe one day, when the motel walls close in and the job offers run dry, when the bills come and the silence grows louder than her pride, she will remember the mornings I made her favorite blueberry muffins, the nights I sat by the window, waiting for her headlights to pull into the driveway safely. Or maybe she will not. Either way, it is no longer my burden to carry. She made her choices, and I made mine. Now, I wake up in a home that does not echo with shame. I drink my coffee warm and alone, without side eyes or accusations. I walk barefoot in my kitchen and plant herbs in the soil I bought myself. I live, truly, fully, quietly. And if she thinks of me at all now, I hope she sees more than a shadow. I hope she sees the truth she tried to bury. I was never a burden. I was the foundation, and when I left, the whole house fell. Because my daughter once called me a burden. But today, I live. And she just has rent due every month. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you of a mother, a grandmother, or maybe even yourself, then know this.